this website because I don't. Okay, so kind of the basic block of time. Well, in the upper left, figure 4.1 is really a sketch of the radar timeline. So the radar timeline is the building block for a lot of larger kind of joint tactical package timelines or planning purposes, which is shown in figure 14.3. So today we're learning the basic radar timeline, which you'll see in the upper left in figure 14.1. That has implications when you're planning target packages, which we'll talk about in air-to-air thread 4 and air-to-ground thread 4. The air-to-air guys are going to be looking at multiples of this timeline when they plan spacing between air-to-air aircraft. So I'm putting this here as the motivation for why this needs to be learned, and you need to be intimately familiar with it, because as you kind of expand your role into a more planning role as part of the package, and you're planning the air-to-air piece, especially for offensive counter-air, it's important that you understand how many timelines are required to accomplish the mission that you need to accomplish as part of that objective. So anyway, just pointing that out so that you have motivation to what's coming later, and you see the linkages there. All right, any questions on kind of the multiple timelines that's coming in the future?
No questions.
Okay, we're still on essentially defensive counter air. So figure 14.4 shows different kinds of combat air patrols, right? We've seen Havacap and we've seen Barcap. There's point defense, there's area defense. So still we are in the defensive counter air role. So we aren't necessarily going out and hunting anything yet. We are staying someplace, and in principle, unknown or adversary fighters or other aircraft are entering an area that you are supposed to defend. So that's the construct that we have for all of air-to-air thread 3, basically, and the construct in which we're going to talk about radar timelines for air-to-air thread 3. So probably then the most important thing to talk about there is the commit criteria, because until you commit, you're just defending whatever high value air asset or point or area on the ground or some assigned cap orbit, and you just kind of sit there spinning around doing your own thing. So for your mission, there will be some commit criteria. The timeline shows that the minimum commit criteria is a distance. So all the numbers on the left are distance for those that haven't read. Okay, so the minimum commit criteria is something is 35 nautical miles away. If the AIC controller, or if there isn't one and you detect something that's unknown and it's 35 miles away, you are definitely, someone, might be your responsibility, but someone is definitely supposed to go intercept that thing and find out what it is, or potentially shoot it down. Questions on the 35 nautical mile number?
No questions.
No questions. Apologies, I got caught up with something in real life.
It's all right. Okay, so that's kind of the minimum. So that doesn't mean that that's every engagement. And in fact, not only does it depend on your mission, it probably depends on your aircraft type. For example, the F-14 has that powerful radar and may be carrying long-range Phoenix missiles. Its commit criteria may be 80 or 100 nautical miles. So not only does it depend on the aircraft type, but it may depend on the mission planning, depending on how many aircraft were available or the assignments of caps in the sky. This cap may be designed to commit at 60 nautical miles. This cap may be designed for a commit criteria at 50 nautical miles. I'm just pointing out that there isn't one number to hang your hat on for what the commit criteria is or should be, but there is definitely a minimum number that is going to exist. And so the diagram shows 35 nautical miles, and that's what we'll use here. And as you get into long range, or actually medium range air-to-air missiles, you'll discover 35 miles is actually pretty damn close. So yeah, if it's 35 miles away and you haven't committed, you should definitely commit on it, because it can make everyone's day pretty bad here in the next 60 seconds. All right, questions on the 35 nautical mile minimum distance? Okay, so radar timeline is still looking at eyes cage to figure 14.1. So at the minimum, 35 miles. Might be 40, might be 50, might be 80, might be 100. Everyone at this point knows what the commit is. You've turned, and you're starting to prosecute that group. As part of that process, you are informing the AIC controller that you're committing to that group. AIC controller accounts for that. You are now leaving your cap and vectoring yourself to intercept that group. Questions on what the commit means and why it needs to be communicated and who is accounting for what when you communicate it? Okay, so you turn yourself towards this group because you've committed on it, and people are accounting for you and whatever. We're going to talk about what happens at that point with the formation and the radar mechanics. We've kind of given you a little preview of the formation. So at this stage, you can cage your eyes to figure 14-10, which is kind of the gray background image in the center here. So you're going to move out of whatever formation you were in when you were just spinning around in your cap, and you're going to move to a combat spread, and you're going to start caging your radars to the area. We're going to talk about how exactly to do that. What happens then is, you're closing in on the group, and the AIC controller is probably calling out additional information about how that group is maneuvering, or potentially any other factor groups that are going to be a factor on your way to this commit. At some point between when you commit to the group and when you physically get there within visual range, you're going to get radar contact with the group. And what happens then is you've essentially relieved the AIC controller of pumping you with situational awareness information based on his radar of where the group is. You've essentially told them, all right, our own radars have got them. Different radars have different power, different geometries in the sky. Maybe ground clutter prevented you from seeing them at 60 nautical miles, whereas a different geometry, it allowed you to see them at 60 nautical miles. Different target aircraft have different radar cross sections, right? So all these things factor in. There's no one number you can hang your hat on. Even if you only fly one airplane, you still can't hang your hat on, okay, I can always get radar contact on a group at 60 nautical miles in this airplane. You still just can't hang your hat on that. So that's why you are communicating when you have radar contact with the group that you have committed on. Questions on why you communicate that you have radar contact? Okay. Regardless of your aircraft type, and pretty much regardless of the aircraft that are in this game at least, by the time you hit 30 nautical miles, you should definitely be able to put energy on that contact, get it back, and get a detection and a track. So 30 nautical miles is the next magical number. And 30 nautical miles is when you are going to target the group. It may happen before that. You may pick them up at 35 nautical miles if your commit criteria was 60 or 80 or what have you. So it's not to say that magically at 30, that's necessarily when this all has to start. But certainly by then, you should have some good radar contacts of the group that you committed on, and potentially any other nearby groups. Question on that concept before we talk more about targeting. Okay, so the time between you have turned to commit on the group and when you start targeting the group, several things are going on. The AIC controller is watching the overall picture. The AIC controller is continuing to pump you with information about the group that you've committed on, which is kind of your highest priority in your mind, and any nearby groups, which are the next highest priority things in your mind. You're also working radar mechanics. We're still going to talk about how to do that here in just a moment, but you're working radar mechanics so that you can get your own independent radar situational awareness. So you're not A, dependent on the AIC controller, and B, so the AIC controller can divert his attention to other fighters because you're not the only group out there providing air defense. Okay, so your job as a fighter then, between the commit and the targeting phase, is to be, of course, getting radar contact on this group. And when you get that radar contact, or you think you have it, the next step that's not explicitly shown here in this timeline is you need to start correlating what you have with the AIC controller on his scope. So the AIC controller has been watching the big picture, and he's been watching it for several minutes. He kind of has some good situational awareness on what's happening in the sky. At some point, I mean, you were listening, okay, picture, whatever, blah, 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 blah. At some point, it met the commit criteria, so you turn your plane in that direction. You don't have nearly as much situational awareness on the overall picture as the AIC controller has. He's pumping you with information over the radio. You eventually get radar energy on this group and potentially any nearby groups. Your radar is higher fidelity than his. So step one is you think you have a contact, you have the same contact that he's talking about, that same group on your radar scope, but you don't know that. So when you think you've got it, you now need to do what's called a correlation. I see something. Definitely my eyeballs got it. My radar's got it. You're assuming your radar's not lying to you. And since we don't have any ECM effects in this game, okay, your radar's not lying. You cannot see the AIC controller's scope. You also cannot climb into his mind and see all the picture and situational awareness that he's had for the past 5 or 10 minutes. All you've got is him talking to you. The last time he spoke to you may have been 15 seconds ago when he gave you an update on this group. At best, then, that information is 15 seconds old. In reality, it may be as old as 35 or 40 or 45 seconds. So you are seeing a group. You need to say to the AIC controller, essentially, I've got this group. I think it's my group, so I committed to East Group, let's say. You're going to phone them up and say, I've got contact. East Group, Bulls 215 67 22,000, track south. If that instantaneously matches or is close to what the AIC controller sees, then you have a good correlation. You can be reasonably assured you are talking about the same threat group that had the same label, East Group. That's why we've been asking all the time, what has the label been? And you might figure, well, who cares, because I was committing to the thing. Now we're going to start correlating because there may be several groups in close proximity, and you may have 3 separate blue team groups all committing on, let's say, 3 factor groups. The 3 factor groups are in close proximity, but the 3 blue team groups are committing from an angular spread of 80 degrees. So everyone's kind of converging into the center, and everyone needs to be sure that if you committed to West Group, or you committed to South Group, or you committed to East Group, that the group you have that you've accounted for, that you've been accounted for, if you committed to South Group, everyone's expecting you to engage South Group eventually, that you have South Group truly in your sights, and you haven't mistaken it for someone else or mistaken it for another aircraft that you could see that the AIC controller could not see because his radar is lower fidelity. Questions on the point of the correlation, which happens before the targeting. Okay, so that correlation is now you telling the AIC controller in the same format the same things that he's been pumping you with in air-to-air thread 2. Hopefully you've been paying attention and you know that format cold. Okay. After that point, you've got a correlation. You're reasonably assured now that if you committed to East Group or South Group or First Group or Pop-Up Group or whatever the name was, you committed to it, you got radar contact, you correlated with the AIC controller. The AIC controller is now satisfied that you have your own independent radar contact on that group. You are satisfied that you have your own independent radar contact on the same group that the AIC controller was talking about. Now the AIC controller can take a back seat. These guys have it. Situational awareness is maximum. There's no confusion. I can start servicing other groups. I'm still going to pay attention a little bit to make sure these guys don't lose situational awareness, but assuming that they're not stupid, I don't have to pay a lot of attention to them. I just have to pump them with information like, hey, there's a pop-up group that wasn't there before and is in your area. Hey, he's close enough. It's now a threat group, right? So that's the by exception part that FA has been talking about. But in principle, assuming that pop-up groups don't materialize or threat groups don't vector into the airspace, the AIC controller never has to say anything to you for the rest of the engagement. That means you are on your own with your wingman. Questions on the state of the engagement at this point in time? All right, as mentioned, you're probably, in the 30, maybe 30 to 40 nautical mile range after you get all this correlation stuff done and blah, blah, blah. So by the way, when you were closing in to commit on that group, you were probably traveling at Mach 0.8 or 0.9. And the adversary group, in principle, was probably traveling at Mach 0.8 or 0.9, potentially right at you, which means that these miles are going to tick away really, really fast. You don't have 7 minutes to go through all of this discussion. You've got maybe 20, 30, possibly 40 seconds to talk about all this. So there's no time to be confused. There's no time to say the wrong words and cause confusion. There's no time to sit there and think, what should I say and what's the appropriate format? You need to know it cold, because the enemy is not going to wait for you to get yourself sorted before they turn back into you and try to kill you. Questions on the importance of knowing what you're doing? Time is against you. If you know what you're doing, time's also against the enemy, by the way. If you know what you're doing, you win because they're behind the ball. If you're behind the ball, you lose, regardless of your skills, regardless of the technological capability of your airplane. Doesn't matter. You lose SA, your SA quickly falls from 90 to 20%. In your confusion, you get blown up. Any questions on that? Excellent. All right, so around the 30 nautical mile point, you're going to enter a very rehearsed, and so you're starting this rehearse, you're going to enter a very rehearsed timeline. In general, every 5 nautical miles that's rolling back, right? We see 35, 30, 25, 20, 15. In general, those 5 nautical miles are rolling back every 30 seconds. So the numbers shown here are distances and nautical miles. You can have a corresponding number and just think of it about every 30 seconds. So as it's shown, you know, if you really committed at 35 nautical miles, you really only have about 30 seconds to get yourself pointed in the right direction, to get yourself correlated with the group and have that discussion with the AIC controller so that the AIC controller can get out of the loop, and it's just up to you as the committing group to start working the rest of the timeline before that 30 nautical mile point. Questions on how 5 miles is essentially equivalent to 30 seconds? Okay, so then the targeting happens. So you're reasonably assured now that the group that you have on your radar scope is the group that the AIC controller was talking about. You have the same labels. There's no confusion there. AIC controller initially was talking about East group. You committed to East group. You got radar contact. I think it's East group. AIC controller confirms, yep, I see East group in the same place you just said he was. You're on East group. I'm out of the picture. You as your fighter package says, great, AIC controller is not going to interrupt us unless it's really, really, really important. We're going to start talking amongst ourselves. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start targeting the group. Looking around, so that's the group that I wanted. That's East group. I'm going to start looking around, sanitizing the airspace. What's around that group? Is there something that I can see that the AIC controller cannot? If so, we need to have a discussion about it. We thought there was only one group there. Man, now I see 6 or 8 airplanes. Yee, that wasn't part of the plan. Do we want to abort at this point? Come out, rethink about it, tell the AIC controller, hey man, you know, there's 8 airplanes here. We might want to vector in some additional help before we all collectively engage this thing, right? Could have. Let's assume everything there's nothing unexpected, right? You know, AIC controller saw the groups, and he probably did because the stupid game has infinite radar resolution for some reason. So fine. Most of the time, there's not going to be anything unexpected. So, all right, you're targeting the group. You're scanning the area. Okay, sure enough, the AIC controller said it was a group. The AIC controller said there's probably 2 airplanes there. I'm scanning around. Yep, there's definitely 2 airplanes there and nothing unexpected. Let's pause there and talk about how you were doing that. Figure 14.6 talks about how the radars are organized between you and your wingman. When you turn to the commit, and as you are gaining situational awareness in the sky, as you are looking for your threat group that you have committed on, and as you begin the targeting process, you need to be scanning the entire sky. That means you need to have an 8, for the Navy birds, the F-18s, you are in essentially an 80-degree azimuth sweep. So you have a wide sweep. It also means that you're probably in a 6-bar scan. It could be, I suppose, as little as a 4-bar scan, but you're probably in a 6-bar scan so you can get a lot of vertical extent. The flight lead typically is going to scan the high part of the sky, and the wingman's going to scan the low part of the sky. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can swap if you want, but you better have an agreement before you even climb into the plane what the so-called contract is for your scanning of the sky. And the way that works is you set your maximum radar range to 80 miles. For long-range intercept aircraft like the F-14, you might have your radar set to 160 miles. Anyway, suffice to say, you set your, for most of the airplanes in this game, you set your maximum radar range to 80 nautical miles. Then you place your radar bug at a distance of 25 nautical miles. And assuming that the flight lead is the guy who's scanning the high sector, the flight lead is going to adjust his radar elevation to scan everything from about 15,000 feet up to 40,000 feet. unless you happen to know that the threat group is higher than that, in which case you need to look up even further and adjust those numbers. But these are some good basic numbers that work. Questions on the flight lead, in this case, doesn't have to be, but let's just assume that's the contract. The flight lead scanning from 15 to 20, or from 15 to 40,000 feet with the bug placed at 25 nautical miles. So essentially anything at 25 nautical miles, he is scanning 15 to 40,000 feet. Questions on that concept?
You used the term sector earlier. Is that like a defined kind of unit of measurement for this specifically, or is it just kind of just only applies to that particular radar block for this particular thing?
Sector is a generic term that just means we've essentially broken up the world into something smaller than everything so that we can split it up amongst our team. For example, in figure 14.4, West Bar Cap may have what we call the West Sector. They're defending the West Sector. What that means is the East Bar Cap doesn't necessarily have to worry about all of that airspace. He can just focus on something less than everything. So a sector is a generic term. The Army has sectors for their fire teams. And within the fire teams, there are firing arcs, sectors that you're responsible. Alpha team, you are engaging anyone to the north. Bravo team, you're engaging anyone to the south. Those are the sectors assigned. Does that answer that question?
Yep.
Yes, no.
Yeah. Sorry, I must have clipped.
Okay. So that is the flight lead. He's scanning from 15 to 40,000 in principle. The wingman, the contract said he was going to scan the low part. He again is setting his radar bug at 25 nautical miles, and he's adjusting his radar elevation to scan from the surface to 25,000 feet. There's some overlap there to ensure that a contact does not slip through the seams, so to speak. But the flight as a two-ship are working on independent from the AIC controller, gaining maximal situational awareness on everything, especially that low altitude block. As we've been seeing with some of these later AIC classes, we've been dropping the altitude of the Hawkeye so that there's significant shadow regions where it can't see low altitude contacts. The AIC's job is not to be a magic eyeball in the sky that sees everything. He tries to see as much as he can, but the world, topography, simply gets in the way, and there's nothing you can do. If you, as the fighter group, miss a low fighter and he sneaks up underneath you and behind you, whose fault is that? It's not the AIC controller's fault. There's nothing he can do, and he doesn't suffer the consequence because he's far away and doesn't get shot down. It's your job to scan the entire sky to catch things the AIC controller didn't catch. But even if the AIC controller caught it, you need to have radar contact with all of it to maintain your situational awareness meter above 95%. If you don't, something will sneak by you, and it's your fault because you did not do this procedure properly. And you'll be the one that suffers the consequence because that guy's not going to go shoot down some other group or the Hawkeye. It's going to shoot down you because you were flying towards them. Questions on why we are doing this overlapping scan of a low altitude and high altitude block.
Quick question on the mechanics of this all, and maybe going back just a bit to what you said about the bar scan. I think you said it should be like in 6, no less than 4. So I assume that means like that at no point really during this timeline should your radar be in track while scan.
Correct. You are looking for all of the contacts out there. You need to see them first before you start focusing your attention. The middle part of this timeline is focusing your attention. But if you didn't see them, there's no way you can focus your attention on them. And even worse, if you didn't see them and you start focusing your attention, the likelihood that you're going to see things that you missed diminishes rapidly. And up till this point, essentially Stahl and Anklin are the only ones who have gone through the evaluation for air-to-air thread 2. But they've learned in kind of brutal ways what happens when you are missing certain contact. Because we're setting up the evolutions to highlight what happens when you miss certain contacts. All right. Questions on these overlapping kind of altitude block areas that each aircraft is supposed to scan? Okay. So, if you think about the geometry of this all, if things are in your face, if they're 10 nautical miles away, in principle, you could miss them. But, by the time you started the commit, presumably all the airspace in the immediate vicinity of you was sanitized. So here you're kind of flying towards the adversary airspace in principle. And as you're moving that way, you're scanning the entirety of the sky. You have in principle a 6-bar scan, maybe a 4-bar scan. So you're trying to get situational awareness on any contact there. The issue is it's a 6 or potentially 4-bar scan. So you do not have a lot of opportunities for the radar to put energy on that contact before you get to the targeting phase. Right? If it's a 6-bar scan and you're scanning an 80-degree azimuth, you might only get 2 full scans in that 30-second window. And if you committed, let's say at 35, or you happen to get yourself lined up and it was 35 nautical miles out, you only had 30 seconds. And that assumes that all your radar elevation was set the right way and whatever. You only had 30 seconds to complete 2 scans. If the geometry of the fighter was such that he was in your notch filter, or he was obscured by a mountain briefly when the radar passed over him or whatever, you didn't even see him for one of those scans, potentially both of those scans. So it's probably a good idea to turn to commit earlier so you can get potentially 4 or 6 or 8 full volume scans. The farther away you commit, the more time you have to scan the airspace, although the airspace changes because you're moving towards it. So, the farther stuff, whatever, but it's coming into radar detect range. But the nearer stuff you're flying out of. So the nearer stuff, you might have only happened to get a scan once. So anyway, that's why the altitude, your wingman in this case, although it could be you, but one of the airplanes is scanning low, one of the airplanes is scanning high. That means both of you need to know how to operate your radar, and there needs to be no question about how to operate your radar and how to set all these things. There's no time for a discussion. You're just expected to know how to do it and just execute the. What questions are there on these 2 altitude blocks and how to set your radar elevation and all that and complete these scans? Okay. One thing we haven't talked about, and it's mentioned briefly in the document, is you might be repositioning your altitude. So I don't know, you were orbiting at 18,000. The East group, let's say that you committed, is at 25,000. You decide you want to be at 27,000 for whatever reason, energy advantage or whatever. So you're going to be climbing up, which is okay. But as you're climbing up, you need to adjust your radar elevation to take into account the changing geometry, because you're still supposed to scan these volumes. Just going to point that out. Okay. So at this point, you've committed. At this point, you've scanned the whole area. At this point, you've broken up the scanning duties between the 2 of you. At this point, you've got contact on at least, presumably, the group you committed on and potentially other groups. If there are other groups nearby, it's good that you have your own independent situational awareness on them. You've communicated that you at the minimum have radar contact with the group you committed on. You've correlated all that with the AIC controller. The AIC controller acknowledges all that and turns over the engagement to you with priority on the comms. The AIC controller is now communicating to you by exception only, and it's mostly you talking to your wingman. And you're beginning the targeting phase. Questions on the timeline up to this point? Okay. So the targeting phase. Okay, we see all the groups for whatever reason. We decided any other groups that we saw weren't a factor because some other one's committing on them or whatever. If they were, some other branches to the storyline happen, but essentially we've decided maybe in the simplest case, that's the only group that we see because it's the only group we should see. We have our own independent situational awareness on it. And now we've got it correlated. There's no question it's the same group that we're talking about. The AIC controller can get out of my face now, and I can start doing my job as a fighter. And so we're going to start talking amongst ourselves. So that's kind of the situation that we're in. Okay. So what happens is now you don't need to scan the entire sky anymore. It's possible that only one of the two of you has radar contact with this group. You know, let's say the radar volumes were separated in the way that's shown in the diagram, where the flight lead is scanning high and the wingman is scanning low. And let's say the altitude of that group is such that only the flight lead sees it because it's up high and the wingman does not see it. So the discussion on the comm between the flight now is going to be, again, so as part of the correlation process, let's say the group was at 37,000, just to make it easy. As part of the correlation process, you were talking to the AIC controller. You said, I see East Group. He's at Bulls 215, 67, 37,000. Whatever. And the AIC controller says, yep, okay, that's your group. You got it, blah, 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 blah. In principle, the wingman was listening to that, but maybe not. And so you need to give a directive call now. You need to communicate to each other, whatever your name is, Hammer12, whatever. Hammer12, target group bra. In this case, you know, let's use the diagram that's shown here. Target group, I don't even know, what does it say? Okay, sure. Target group, it might be target group bra 010, 60 miles, 37,000. You don't necessarily know which direction it's flowing yet because you haven't put it in a track while scan. But you can at least provide that. That lets the wingman start to swing his radar elevation up and get energy on that contact. Questions on how to communicate that to your wingman?
So is this essentially a sort in order to...
Nope, not yet. Sort's coming up. We're getting our virtual eyes, our radar eyes on the same group. We're melding the radar. And we're also melding our situational awareness, by the way. We're rejecting all the stuff we don't care about and starting to put our joint eyes on the same group. Other questions on how to do that? It's going to be the same calls that you've been talking to the AIC controller with. Potentially, right? It may be out there, or the AIC controller may not have switched to BRA because we're supposed to be doing this meld essentially at the 25 nautical mile point. Before that, we were supposed to have correlated with the AIC controller. In principle, that may all have happened outside of kind of the 40 nautical mile limit where the AIC controller is going to switch to BRA. If the AIC controller has to switch to a BRA format for you, it takes considerably more time and attention on his part. because he has to focus on you and start drawing lines and all sorts of stuff instead of just saying, here's the contact, I already have it printed out in bullseye format, I'm just going to read it off to you. If the AIC controller has switched to BRA, you are probably failing or falling behind in this time. Questions on that? If you are failing or falling behind on the timeline, you are now sacrificing the AIC's situational awareness and mental workload to make up for your failure. As you can imagine, it only takes one, maybe two blue groups for that to happen before the AIC controller starts losing sight of pop-up groups and cannot relay that to anyone. It's your fault. You are screwing everyone and everyone on your coalition because you did not know how to do the radar timelines properly or manipulate your buttonology or whatever the problem was. And even worse, everyone else is going to know it because you are constantly saying your call sign on the radio. Questions on how that is a bad thing to have happen? All right, so assuming that you know what to do and you did all your buttonology and you got your correlations and all of that stuff, we're going to start melding our situational awareness. So in my example, as the flight lead, I had contact on this guy. My wingman didn't. I'm going to start telling him where it is so he can start manipulating his radar elevation and get radar contact on the same group, east group in our case. Wingman reports that he's got it, or maybe the wingman had it and the flight lead didn't. So the wingman's telling the flight lead where it is. Flight lead's manipulating his radar elevation. Okay, I got it. Same group. So by the way, one of the guys had situational awareness on it and the other guy didn't. He correlated that with the AIC controller. The AIC controller told him, yep, same guy. I'm going to stop talking to you now and do some other things. In principle now, the only guy who has high fidelity situational awareness on the group is the guy who had radar contact. So the next step is he's communicating it to the other guy in the flight, be it the wingman or the flight lead. So you need to maintain that high fidelity contact until you have two sets of eyeballs pointing their virtual eyeballs, their radar, at that group. And now both people have situational awareness, high fidelity track on where that group is. Questions on the importance of the meld here? Okay. So then at this point in time, you've got radar energy on the same group. Both people agree that this is east group. Both people have correlated it without relying on the AIC controller. So there's a little bit of a game of telephone here. And if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you miscommunicate information and it's your fault. Maybe the AIC controller is watching over you and has high enough mental bandwidth and situational awareness to correct you. Probably not. Don't expect it or rely on it. All right, so you've got radar energy on the same group. Great, you can switch to a track while scan at this point and start getting some additional information about it. The additional information that you want is what is the heading of it. The consequence of the track while scan is you can't survey the entire sky anymore, but you don't need to because you sanitize the whole airspace. You independently verified for the AIC controller, so you're both on the same page, that there's no unexpected groups here, which means I'm safe to put all of my attention and therefore radar energy on just this group. Let's say East group, continuing with our thread of examples. So you enter a track while scan, and the track while scan, because of the underlying radar scheduling and radar computer processing associated with it, needs to minimize the azimuth that it's scanning back and forth and the number of bars that it's scanning with. You may choose to intentionally set it to something lower. For example, in the F-18, I think if you set it to like a 4-bar track while scan, your maximum azimuth is like 40 degrees or something like that. you may want to intentionally set it to a 20-degree azimuth and 2-bar scan, because you know that you can focus all your energy on just this group. And maybe this group only has one airplane, so I don't even need to have to worry about altitude diversity. Maybe I want a 1-bar scan. And when I do that, not only, so the azimuth is determining how quickly my radar antenna is swinging back and forth. The tighter the azimuth, the more quickly I can revisit the radar contact and therefore get higher fidelity updates on what it is it's doing. As I minimize the number of bars, again, I'm minimizing the time to revisit that target, and again, getting considerably faster updates. So in general, we're working with factors of 2. So when you drop from 4 to 2 bars, you're hitting it twice as frequently. When you drop from 80 degrees azimuth to 40 degrees azimuth, in principle, you're hitting it twice as frequently again. So pretty soon you can increase the revisit rate a factor of 8 to 16 times, which is probably pretty good if you're looking to keep track of whether this thing is maneuvering in the sky, which it probably is, since you're about 25 nautical miles away from it, and it probably is aware of you now at this point and is beginning to counter maneuver against you. Questions on the transition here, what the purpose of the meld was, and focusing the attention and radar energy, and you using your buttonology to further facilitate it instead of relying on the minimum constraints enforced by the radar mechanics and radar processor. Any questions on any of that or the purpose behind it? Okay, so both airplanes, both pilots were doing that at roughly the same time. They presumably are roughly the same skill, so they're both going to complete it at roughly the same time. And you've got tons, a high revisit rate. Let's say the contact group had 2 contacts in it. So you've got, in principle, a high revisit rate on both contacts. Both guys are tracking these contacts because it's entered the tracking filter of their radar in the track while scan mode. And so we're going to enter something called the sorting phase. As soon as we've got our eyes focused on it, we've got them all. Now we're going to start assigning individual airplanes to individual humans in this flight. So down below figure 1410, it talks about the sort priorities. A good contract, although you can reorganize this however you want, is to sort in azimuth first, then range with next priority, then elevation with last priority. Up above figure 1412, it talks a little bit more about it. It's fine to sort in azimuth, but okay, I've got, let's say they're split in azimuth. Who's picking the guy on the left and who's picking the guy on the right? So here is another resolution, next level of resolution in kind of this contract. The lead will sort, if the guys are split in azimuth, the lead will take the guy on the left and the wingman will take the guy on the right. So you don't have to have this discussion. If they're split in range, the lead will take the adversary lead man and the wingman will take the adversary trail man. If they are stacked, the lead will take the high man and the wingman will take the low adversary man. These are some good suggestions. You're free to come up with whatever organization you want with the people you're flying with. Make sure you brief them so everyone knows and there's no confusion, because there's no time to have a discussion about it in the air. Everyone should know what they're doing. Questions on kind of the sort priorities, and then when you're within the sort, who should pick the left or right guy, or who should pick the lead or trail man, or who should pick the high or low. And figure 12 shows a picture for those who don't like the text of what it is we're talking about. Okay, so let's see, radio communications here. So You may, so let's say you've got yourself melded and whatever, and you're starting the sort. And so what you're going to communicate is, if you, let's take the azimuth sort, the leftmost picture in diagram 14 or figure 1412. So the flight lead is going to communicate to everyone in the flight. There's only 2 people in the flight. He's going to, say essentially that he is sorted on the left man. And he's going to wait for his wingman to say he's sorted, the right man is sorted. That lets everyone know that not only have we melded our radars and we've got situational awareness on this group, I have configured my radar appropriately and I'm getting the appropriate radar returns and I can see these 2 guys. I've sorted, I've got my bug, my buttonology, however my computer handles it. I've got the computer tracking the left guy. You're waiting for your wingman to say, yep, okay, you got left guy, I've got right guy. It's possible your wingman, for whatever reason, cannot get the right guy. Maybe he can't get either guy. Maybe it's possible for him to only get the left guy and you can see both for whatever reason, so you're going to swap quickly and pick the right guy. That's where this discussion happens. Sorted left man, your wingman comes back and says that he is, I don't know, naked or he can't see him or whatever. Then there's a quick discussion. Can you see the left guy? He may not know there's a left guy if he can't, that it's the left guy if he can't see the right guy. Probably works better for something like range. But if for whatever reason the wingman can target only the left guy and whatever, and oh, by the way, the F-16 may show this too because it shares over the data link who's targeting. It's possible to quickly swap, right? Okay, wingman, whatever your name is, hammer 1-2, target, now that's a different term, target left man, hammer 1-1, target right man. So now that's a directive command. So target is kind of the inherent next step of this when you're sorted. Okay, I see the guy on the left, I see the guy on the right, boom. Lead, hammer 1-1, target left man, hammer 1-2, target right man. That lets you know that, okay, not only do I see him, everything's set, so we've got ourselves sorted. Now we are in cleared to move on to the next step, targeting. And I've put the left man in single target track. I don't have to be aware of the right man anymore in my track while scan because my wingman has situational awareness on him. I know what's going to happen next. I'm putting the left guy in single target track. My wingman's putting the right guy in single target track. Questions on the transition from the sort to the targeting? Okay. At that point, we can start talking about employing missiles, which we aren't going to talk about today. So that's kind of the Fox 3 crank that you see at the timeline at no later than 20 nautical miles. So we'll pick that up at a later class. So the radar timeline that we're talking about today is essentially from the commit through the meld, essentially into the targeting, and you getting each target into a single target track in preparation to employ weapons. Some variations there, if for whatever reason your wingman can't see the groups, either airplane in the group, the flight lead who can see both in track while scan may have to fire on both in track while scan while the wingman sorts himself out. But you can see, if you don't have the skills, how much of a problem you create for everyone when you don't know how to get your radar pointed in the right direction or manipulate the radar elevation or manipulate the PRF mode to match appropriately what the contact is doing, right? Because these contacts could attempt to start to beam you and notch you, and you need to maintain radar contact. Don't rely on someone else to tell you how to manipulate your radar. You should know how to manipulate it and maintain radar contact with that group. If you lose it for whatever reason, because the adversary is notching you, maybe the AIC controller can see it because he's on a different azimuth or whatever. If that happens, you've blown the entire timeline. You're not even really in the commit anymore because you have no idea where they are. You're relying on the AIC controller. You've blown the entire timeline. You don't have SA. You have no idea what the hell's happening. You're relying on someone else, literally hundreds of nautical miles away, to tell you what the picture is for something that is within 30 miles. It's probably time to leave before you get killed. So those are the ways that things can go sideways and how rapidly they can go sideways. If you don't know how to manipulate your radar and that group notches you and they vanish from your scope and then they dive or climb and then you kind of come out and now you can't see them because your radar elevation is tight and you're in a 1-bar or 2-bar scan or whatever, and you lost while you got your head down in the cockpit pressing buttons. Guess what they're doing? They're swinging up way high above you or way down below you at full afterburner, and they're going to get behind you in the next 90 seconds and kill you. And you have no idea it's happening. And the AIC controller has no idea it's happening because he handed off control to you because you had your own situational awareness, and he's helping some other group who's 80 nautical miles away get turned to their commit. Questions on how quickly it can go from 95% situational awareness to 10 and then you die.
Yeah, I'll ask the dumb question then. Like, is there sort of like a 5-second rule or something that where, like, if they do notch you and you're able to regain radar contact within, let's say, 5 to 10 seconds, is it okay to continue the intercept, or as soon as that happens, are you basically turning around 180 degrees and trying again later?
Again, there's just so many variables. It's up to you and your experience in that situation. And since you have no experience, that's one of the things we're going to drill a whole bunch in air-to-air thread 3.
Cool.
All of the OPFOR, human OPFOR guys have been holding back for air-to-air thread 2. They aren't going to hold back in air-to-air thread 3. They're going to be looking for any weakness in your radar timeline mechanics, any weakness in your medium range missile employment, and then they're going to look to capitalize on it immediately. Air-to-air combat is unforgiving, and it happens so damn quickly. And luckily, we're doing it in training, and we have the benefit of debrief tools like TACView or equivalent things in the real world so that we can learn from the mistakes. And that technological ability to go back and learn from the mistakes is what separates the United States from pretty much everyone else in the world. Trying to learn it the hard way, you die a bunch in the beginning because that's just the way it is. And then if you die, you didn't get a chance to learn. Anyway, we're going to do that here because that's what we do with the real U.S. military and all of our allies. Air-to-air thread 2, the OPFOR guys have been holding back. That's not the case for air-to-air thread 3. And then air-to-air thread 4, we're just throwing more into the mix, right? So air-to-air thread 3 is still at most 2 adversaries in a group. Air-to-air thread 4 is 4, maybe 4 in a group, and maybe as many as 20 airplanes in a package coming at you. Just like the real world. So anyway, that's what's coming up. The take-home point is you need to know these radar timelines code. You need to know your own buttonology code. You need to know the radio communications code. You need to know what all the words that are said on the radio mean. This is why brevity comes about, is because there's so much to communicate in a short period of time while you're manipulating buttons and talking on different radios and blah, blah, blah. And we haven't even thrown the missile launch in here. So coming up next is, okay, we have to launch a missile at some point, and then we have to counter maneuver after we launch that missile to minimize the adversary's weapon engagement zone so we can try to protect ourselves, and all the while have our situational awareness meter above 95% so we can decide, I guess, number one, should you even fire on this thing? Is it hostile or not? Or did you just shoot on a Boeing 737 filled with people flying out of the Ukraine? The next is, okay, you're going to fire on it. How effective was that missile, and should we continue the assault or should we not? This is the Top Gun movie. You committed on a group. It looked like there were 2 fighters, and all of a sudden it's 4, 5, and then 6 fighters. So just because you had radar energy on this thing, and sure enough, it looks like 2 airplanes or whatever, maybe they were flying really, 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 really close. And by the time you get close to them, now there's 4 airplanes and it's 4 on 2, and that's very bad. And again, all of this is you're bleeding away 5 nautical miles every 30 seconds. It's not a lot of time from the timeline shown in figure 14.1 here, from the no later than commit until you're on top of it. The adversaries up to now have been pretty basic F-5s, MiG-19s, maybe MiG-21s with basic IR missiles. In air-to-air threat 3 and later, they aren't basic missiles, and they're more advanced. Su-33s, Su-27s, J-11s, MiG-25s, MiG-30. And sometimes the rules of engagement don't allow you to fire at 60 nautical miles because you don't know what the hell it is. Maybe you know what kind of type it is, but you don't have any information about which side it's on. Or maybe you have information about which side it's on and which what type it is, but you're not allowed to fire because the rules of engagement don't allow you to fire on them while they're in their own airspace. We're going to explore all that in air-to-air thread 3. It quote unquote gets real, so to speak, in air-to-air thread 3. We were mostly just kidding around in air-to-air thread 2, getting people on their feet. Looking back on it, for those that have completed it, it's like, well, it wasn't all that hard. There were some things to do. Air-to-air thread 3, it gets hard. As I pointed out to the guys who did it this week, in its sketch, I've put out that air-to-air thread 3 takes 70 something days. Essentially 2.5 months, because there's so much to cover. So anyway, that's what's coming up. What questions do people have on the basic radar timelines here? We're going to pick it up, as I mentioned, firing missiles, and then what happens as you get to the decision to make an abort or to defend, and then get into the merge. And then the merge has its own 2 blue ship now air combat maneuvering. So those are all their own independent classes. But we're talking about everything up until about 20 nautical miles. What questions are there on the radar timeline up until about 20 nautical miles? Okay.
Nope, just real quick. Sorry. This is probably an obvious thing, but if you're just a single ship and you're kind of doing this for the meld phase, I assume you just have more time. Is that the case, or are you doing something different, whereas you kind of have to cover a larger volume of sky?
Yeah, you have to cover a larger volume of sky, but the timeline is faster because you don't have to coordinate with another human. You already know what you're aware of as the sole member of the flight. So the intra-flight communication, which is getting situational awareness to match for all members of the flight, is fast because now that's happening inside your own sky. Okay. So the radar timelines is going to be the theme at the beginning of air-to-air thread 3 AIC. There may be AIC classes where there's air-to-air thread 2 people participating as well. So they aren't going to be doing radar timelines, obviously. They're going to be working on kind of the basic air-to-air thread 2 stuff. But for the air-to-air 3 guys, they should be working on radar timelines and communicating with each other. Here, for DCS Academy, we skip over the lone fighter doing all this on their own, because you shouldn't ever be 1v whatever. You should, at the worst, be 2v whatever. And most of the time, it's going to be 2v whatever. So you're focusing on communicating with the wingman and doing all these radar timelines and keeping each other's, or the flight's, collective situational awareness above 95%. Because, as we've pointed out, and then we've shown you the hard way several times, as soon as the SA meter drops to 90, it's going to drop to 80. And as soon as it drops to 80, it's going to drop to 70. As soon as it hits 70, it's hit 40 really quickly, then 20, then 10, then you die. And that quickly is on the order of 5 to 7 seconds. All right, so at this point then, I figure we would hop into the server and get some practice doing some of this stuff. We don't have an AIC control, which is okay, but I can still spawn some groups and people can get practice. I'll spawn the group and just tell you which direction it's at. to get yourself pointed that way, and then I'll just feed you maybe some broad formation, even though it's unrealistic. Maybe I'll just tell you it's bra, I don't know, 030, 84 nautical miles at 19,000. Because you already get a lot of practice listening to the AIC controller and whatever. Most of this is about getting the AIC controller out of your face and you working all the radar mechanics. Can you split the airspace scanning appropriately from the 0 to 25,000 and the 15 to 40,000 altitude block? Can you get situational awareness on that group? For what we'll be doing here in just a moment, it'll just be a single group out there, but there may be air traffic, commercial air traffic flying over the airspace and whatever. Once you've got it, okay, you're closing in on them. Can you then get your radars focused in on them in a track while scan mode, break them out? Okay, I got them. Can you now sort? Can you get contact on target the left guy? Can you get target on the right guy, or target on the lead man, target on the trail man? And more importantly, can you communicate that between the two of you? All of these numbers here are kind of no later than, so it's okay in this situation, right? When there's only one group and there's no AIC controller and we're kind of learning to do the meld when they're 40 miles away, if you have the radar energy to put onto it. Just get some experience and see just how quickly that distance closes. I didn't go over all the comms, so as I mentioned at the beginning, we're essentially covering chapter 14 in the P825 document. But there are associated comms that should come out within the flight at these key points, 30 miles, 25 miles, 20, because everyone needs to be aware of where they are in the timeline. And people may be distracted. So when you hear the call, East Group 30 miles, oh shit, 30 miles, I should be already starting targeting of this thing. 25 miles, oh shit, we should be melding and we aren't anywhere near that. We better start thinking about aborting. Right, so associated call-outs, status call-outs, so everyone, you're looking to maximize situational awareness. Is when the call comes out 30 miles and everyone is like, yeah, duh, that's good. When the call comes out 30 miles and your eyebrows go up and go, oh shit, I didn't realize he was at 30 miles, that's bad. You should be keenly aware of where the adversary group is, because you're closing in on them in principle at a closure rate of nearly Mach 2. It could even be greater than Mach 2, depending on what they're doing and what you decide to do. That is a lot of distance that gets eaten up in just 1 second. Anyway, so if you haven't read chapter 14, boy, I recommend you read chapter 14, but we'll get some practice doing all this stuff here in server 1. Any questions before we join the server?
I have kind of a hard stop at 12. Is that that's not gonna throw any salt in this, is it?
Not for me. I mean, it's mostly up to you all at this point. So, up air-to-air thread 1 and everything before that, we've kind of been holding your hand. Air-to-air thread 2, there was a little bit of hand holding at the beginning, and then we stopped holding your hand. We just kind of provided feedback in the debrief, focusing mostly on places where you need to improve, because what good does it tell you that this went well? You know that. When it didn't go well, that's where it's like, okay, we have to talk about why it didn't go well and what to do next time. That continues more in air-to-air thread 3. Our job is now to come up with situations that are designed explicitly to challenge your weaknesses and bring them out and analyze those weaknesses. So if you don't want to participate, or you think you only need 1 hour of practice instead of 3, it's up to you, whatever you want to get out of it.
Yeah, no, it's I just have an obligation, that's all.
It's okay with me. All right. Any other questions before we hop into the server here?
Yeah, 2 questions from me. First, where would you like Madness and myself to sit in this exercise, and what frequencies should we tune to?
If you guys want to fly together as a 2-ship, that is okay. We'll use the same kind of frequencies we've always been using, 249.8. I'll be there to kind of cue you into the groups that I've spawned for you. And then 131.1, 130.1 for the first 2-ship, maybe 130.2 for the second 2-ship. If there's only going to be 3 aircraft, I guess it's possible to have a heavy section, and you can get practice. Essentially the mechanics for 2 guys aren't that much different than the mechanics for 3 guys, other than how you split the airspace. So, I mean, I would argue that the flight lead should take whatever high block or whatever, and then if there's 2 wingmen, both wingmen pick up the low block, just so each guy gets practice being a wingman. Anyway, that's how I would approach it if that's what you all want to do. But at the minimum, 249.8 to contact the pseudo AIC controller myself, and I'll just be spawning a single group for each evolution. They'll spawn at random, so who knows what it is and what distance and whatever. If it winds up coming up stupidly, I'll just despawn it and spawn another random group until we get something that's not stupid. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, sure. We'll run wingman.
Yeah, easy enough. And understand, it's on one hand, it's kind of advanced, but on the other hand, it's not necessarily that advanced, right? It's orthogonal to what you've been doing because you called the commit in air-to-air thread 2, and then there was just empty radio time because this is what was going to fill that radio time. So, I mean, if you guys are cool practicing it, I'm cool. There's nothing that prevents you from doing it. So that's what we'll do. Any other questions on what we're about to do before we hop into the server? Okay, we'll be in server 1 then on the normal NTTR range. You can spawn into your AIC birds if you want, just so you're already in the Alamo corridor. And then once everyone's kind of settled, in formation, ready to go, all the questions have been asked, everyone's got figured out how to do their radar elevation and whatever, I'll start spawning just one group. We'll get a 2-ship group, so it's not stupid that there's only one airplane there. And then we'll just kind of go over the basics here and talk about where things didn't go well or people forgot to do something. Any last minute questions before we hop in? Okay, server 1, I'll see you guys at the minimum on 249.8.
Hawaiian, if you want, I can try and get on and practice some bulls and bras calls from the lot ATC side.
Yeah, if you want to get some practice as an AIC controller, that's good too. I can just spawn the group for you. If I see that the group is going to be stupid, I'll just wipe it off the map and spawn a new one.
Gear up.
DCS check.
Yep, got you loud and clear.
Likewise.
There come the Hornets, I think. At least one of them.
Yep. Yep, so one's at our 3 o'clock, one's at our 9-ish.
There's a Hammer 1.
Oh, they want to stick with the cursed call sign?
No.
Yeah, it's cursed.
There's a 1, Hammer 1.
Rage 1. Go.
Rage 1, Hammer 1, alright, 7 o'clock, 1 mile left. Rejoining. Rage 1, Viking 1, you're 3 o'clock, 4 miles. Correction, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock, yeah, we got you.
Rage 1, Hammer 1, say speed.
Mach 0.8.
Just finishing that.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty choppy frames here.
Rage 1, Viking 1, 5 o'clock, 1 mile.
Was also going with Darkstar as the name.
Yep.
Alright, when you guys are ready, give a check in and we'll spawn some.
Darkstar Rage 1, Alpha check, Bull 13135, 19,000.
1, I'm showing you raw 124 at 35.
Rage 1, currently I'm saying 13743.
Range 1, good alpha check.
I'm a little bit tired as well, so kind of glad for the hard stop. I don't know if you guys wanted to do a check-in as well for the practice on the comms or not, but go right ahead.
I think the plan is we go as a 3 ship, so I think 1 check-in's enough. At least that's what I was under the impression of.
All right. Well, then I guess from here on in, then we'll call Beardy Rage 1-2 Madness 1-3.
Rage 1-3, copies. Rage 1-2.
Single group bull 056 at 105. Angels 16 southwest of Bandy.
Did you call it a bandy?
I believe so. All right. Rage Flight, go spread right.
Rage 1-2. Rage 1-3.
Alright, I'd say go ahead and make heading. Let's go with 030 here.
Rage Flight, check right 030.
Rage 1-2. Rage 1-3.
You guys want to manipulate yourself into a line abreast for me.
Kick it out right.
Single group raw 057 93 16,000 southwest Bandit.
Rage 1 contact, single group bull 056 88 16,000. contact bull 06999, 30,000 declare.
Rage 1, contact 4 lanes, currently bogey.
I'm thinking, do we need to turn 010?
Yeah, we will do.
Rage flight check left, 010.
Rage 1-3.
Dubstar single group is 030, Rod 030 at 30, 16,000 south, hot, and
It can't be hot.
It's hot-ish.
Rage 1-3, contact. No friendly return.
We're at 20. So just get us sorted.
Alright, knock it off. All fighters knock it off. AIC knock it.
Rage 1, knock it off. Rage flight,
And let's
reset cap.
Rage 1. Okay, what questions are there from the fighters on that evolution? There was, a lot of rough around the edges, yes, from the AIC controller. So for this next evolution, I'm going to provide the comms from the AIC controller, get your minds caged to where the contact is, all the way until you have your own independent contact. We'll get the correlation, and then you guys can work your radar mechanics for the targeting and the build and the sword. Did anyone get resolution on how many contacts were in that single group?
Looked like just one, right?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Rage 1-2, nothing.
Alright, so that's okay, because we didn't get to
Speak
the
up.
build part and then the sorting part, but that's going to come up hopefully here in this next evolution.
Yeah, at that range I was only seeing one.
Alright, any other last minute questions here before we get prepped for the next evolution?
How many were there?
Oh, nice.
Did he say 2?
He did, yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause, yeah, I can't really break it out at that range. Like, if they're flying really close together, it's really only going to come up as one. Actually, given the current parameters of the AIC stuff, I could probably get away with 4 bars pretty easy here.
Alright, so we're going to start here.
And I know you guys aren't back yet, but we'll just pick it up.
Yeah, close enough.
2 Jeffs, looks like.
Yeah.
Dark Star, single group, Bulls 336, 100, 21,000, track south, boat. Ridge 1, commit.
What do you want my heading?
Go ahead and make it 330.
Rage 1-2, I think he's tracking us over the SAM sites.
It's a good point, actually. Those are probably active for this one.
Dark Star, Ridge 1, are the SAM sites over Groom Lake active?
330, you said?
330. Let's kind of get in that. Point in that direction.
340, 100 miles, 21,000, track south.
Rage flight, make heading 330, go line abreast right.
Rage 1-2. Rage 1-3.
Dark Star, single group, Bulls 340, 97, 21,000, track south, boat.
Rage 1-2, Nails, Thunder 330.
Dark Star, single group, Bulls 340, 93, 21,000, track south, bogey, sniff, thunder.
Yeah, I'm not actually seeing anything here. Did I turn off the radar?
Well, well, he said track south, so yeah, that's weird.
Dark Star, single group, Bulls 342, 90, 21,000, track south, bogey, sniff, thunder. Rage 1,
There we go.
Dark Star, single group, Bra, 331, 79, 21,000, hot, bogey, sniff, thunder. Dark Star, Rage 1, contact, Bull 35681, 16,000 declare. Rage 1, Dark Star, clean. Dark Star, single group, Bulls 344, 79, 21,000, track south, bogey, sniff, thunder. Rage 1, contact, single group.
Rage 1-2, contact. 1-3, contact.
Rage 1, Dark Star, single group, Bra,
345, 60, 21,000, hot, bogey, sniff thunder.
I feel like I need to be coming right a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
Give me a heading.
Alright, it'll be 335.
Right flight check, right, 335.
Threat group 50 miles. Signal group 42 miles.
Alright, so we have contact. I guess make sure you coordinate with them, get the meld going, and then we're basically done, right?
Pretty much.
Signal group 38 miles.
Yeah, I mean, probably say something on tag.
35 miles.
Range 1 target, single group.
Signal group 30 miles.
Range 1 meld, bra 335.
Range 1 T-mail. On 3 meld. Range 1 2, raid shows 2 ships.
Yeah, I won't actually
Right,
be able to
one
make
touch.
that out.
Range 1C, tally 2 ship.
Actually, I'll try something here.
Range 1 2, tally 12 o'clock high, 2 ship. Nose to nose on me.
Is that the fancy tally shenanigans you were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm playing around with it, see if I can actually break it out, but I don't know if I'll actually have the resolution here to do so.
Rage 1-3, rejoin.
Fighters knock it off. AIC knock.
On 3.
Rage 1, knock it off. Rage flight, hook left, reference 180.
Range 1. Range 3.
Rage 1, reset cap.
Yeah, so what I'm saying there is that I probably don't have the resolution to pick them out if they're flying as close as they were.
We've got the
benefit of, as soon as you meld us and we go track while scan, we can raid the formation to see if there's more than one of them.
We need to check on 249 Pulse Light.
Loud and clear, how many?
5x5. You guys aren't apparently hearing Ryan, though.
No. Rage flight, make heading 138.
Rage 1-2. 1-8.
Can you hear Ryan?
I can. He's looking for a debrief on the previous evolution for you guys as you're flowing back to cap.
I can't hear him.
Yeah, 3. Cannot hear Ryan either.
For these, unless there's an
what'd you guys
objection,
see
you
as
should
you
probably
guys were,
lead the debrief
heading in
since
there?
you're doing the radar.
Yeah.
Well, I think everyone managed to get the contact pretty early. I believe 1-2 identified it as a 2-ship using raid in the Hornet's radar. Myself 1-3 called out it being a 2-ship first, and then 1-2 called out a 2-ship visually. And I think we got to about maybe 8 miles out when they despawned.
And when you said that you had them visually, did you have them, like, actually on screen, or you just had the radar lock up?
Oh no, I could see them. I saw them and visually identified, so I saw 2 specs and called out that it was visually 2 specs.
Okay.
Yeah, they were bellowing a lot of black smoke. I actually saw them quite far away from me.
Yeah, it's a bit of a giveaway with the Jeff's engines.
Alright, you guys copy me on this freak?
Yep, hearing you, readability 5.
Yeah, copy. Okay, so then what questions are there for that radar? I mean, the goal was to drill radar timelines, not to drill the merge mechanics. That's why I desponded. What questions are there for the radar timelines?
My thoughts were there's an awful lot of dead space between when we correlated them and when we went through the rest of the timeline. Would it have been worth leaving one aircraft sanitizing, one aircraft doing a sort of a higher resolution track, essentially split it out that way?
You were broken up. Dead space between what?
There's a lot of dead space between correlation and targeting, melding, etc. Would it have been, is that correct, just leave it sanitizing for as long as possible, or is there something to be said for putting one aircraft to track and leave everyone else sanitizing?
Oh yeah, so I noticed that too. So right, we got the correlation, and I spit out another bra after the Rage claimed that they had it, just to be sure. I didn't hear anything else, and then I was surprised that there was no communication happening amongst the flight to start to narrow up everybody's radar to the same group, and then once you have that, to start breaking apart that group into the sort. So yeah, there was a lot of dead space there that there should not have been.
Right, so how do we balance that against maintaining sanitization for as long as possible?
You don't need to maintain sanitization for as long as possible. You've seen everything, you're starting to get your eyes focused there. You didn't see anything else, the AIC controller didn't see anything else. It's time to start focusing your virtual eyes onto that group and start picking apart what's in. Because once you have what's in there, you can start strategizing about how you're going to start maneuvering the flight or positioning the flight.
If it helps, I can take over the workload of just kind of pointing and directing the flight.
The construct is you've committed to this group, and you're just making sure that there's nothing else in the area
No, that's all right.
that's unexpected. But the big construct is
Good
you're committed
practice.
to it to either visually identify it, and if it's bad, shoot it down, or if you know it's bad, along the way, shoot it.
Alright.
Okay, so just for my
Yeah, like,
benefit, as a
should be
open
talking
planner here,
more on
so
tack
we've committed
from us
really
to
far
them.
out. Got radar
Yeah.
contact sort of on the edge of the detection profile, I would argue.
Though it is also hard when
and then
Hawaiian is
held that radar
constantly
contact to a lot closer
setting
before
stuff
we
on tack.
continued down the timeline.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
part of that is
I'm
also
guessing there
looking
is a
at
sort
the
of balance
radar,
that we had there,
playing
and
around
not,
with that a little bit more than I normally would to see if I can actually break things
other
out.
things with a smaller radar cross section or whatever might turn up in that long space in between.
True, but as we mentioned, we're starting these groups out far, and you're committing because there's only one at a long range, so that you have the time to kind of work through all this to get the experience under your belt, so it becomes automatic. Later on, you could decide, okay, well, we shouldn't start the meld until 60 or 50 or 40. But right now, you should go through all the mechanics of it all with the ample time that you have for each stage, so you can get at least some experience under your belt and learn, oh boy, I need to map my radar and antenna elevation control. Okay, now that I have it mapped, I need to understand how it works. How do I read the screen and see how that works? Right? I mean, all these things that you can't guarantee that each person knows how to do. That's what we're trying to figure out at this stage. Once everyone has kind of the basics down of the mechanics of how to do it, then we can start saying, okay, don't commit at 100, commit at 60. Okay, don't commit at 60, commit at 50, so that you are forced to go through all those mechanics on a shorter and shorter and therefore more realistic time view.
Roger that.
Alright, so you guys are in the area. We're ready to begin unless anyone has any other questions.
Rage flight, go echelon right.
Rage on 3.
Alright, next group is spawn. Track is forming. Stand by for the group.
Star, new picture, single group, pulls 051, 99, 9000, track southwest, bogey.
Rage 1 commit.
So right here, good to roll out.
Let's go with 030.
Dark Star, single group, build 052, 90, 9000, southwest, bogey.
Rage flight, go line abreast right.
Rage 1. Rage 1, 2, 1, 3.
And here we'll probably want to make 015.
Check left 015.
Darkstar single group, Bulls 053, 80, 9000, track southwest, bogey.
Darkstar Ridge 1, contact single group Bull 052, 80, 8000.
H1 to target correlates.
Ridge 1 target single group. And Ridge 1 meld, bra 015. Probably should be putting...
1-2 clean, enable.
1-3 clear, enable. Give distance and altitude.
Meld 015, 50, 8000. Red closures 10,000.
1-3 clean.
This might be a little bit off or off to the left actually. So let's go ahead. Turn 360.
Check left 360.
70, 8,500, track southwest, bogey.
Ridge 1-2 radar contact. 1-3 radar contact.
Again, this is probably going to be not able to break this out on my end.
Ridge 1-2 say again.
Probably won't be able to break out the group if you can see anything there.
Darkstar single group, 25 miles.
Ridge 1-3 tally what looks like a single ship, can't confirm.
Ridge 1-2 raid possible 2 ship. Ridge 1-2 nails unknown.
Ridge 1 copies.
340.
Rage 1-3 tally 2 ship. 2 o'clock.
Rage 1-3, Rage 1-1, no joy.
Rage 1-3 lost radar contact. Azimuth out.
Rage 1-2 faded, left gimbal.
range flight, knock it off. AICs, knock it off. Reset.
Roger, sir, knock it off.
Hook left, reference 180.
Rage 1. Rage 1 3.
Alright, let's do a debrief here with the Rage flight, Rage 1.
Alright, so I think kind of with the meld, the issue was that I was about 10 degrees off there. So that's probably why we weren't having much luck with that. Also, as you guys pointed out, needed to put in the range and altitude there. And still not able to break anything out there, so I am taking a little bit of extra time to play around with the mechanics a bit more and see if I can't get anything, but I don't think, at least for the NPCs when they're flying quite so close and similar, that I'll be able to actually get different groups from that.
Okay, whoever is Rage 1-2 or whatever you're calling yourself.
Rage 1-2. Yeah, so we got out on a combat spread. As you probably heard, the initial call left us unable to comply. I think Rage 1-2, Rage 1-3, we called that out reasonably efficiently. Rage 1-3 then requested further info, which helped us start looking in the right place. I, for one, did the old cursor depress, quick search this area and found the track that way. We then started doing our own bits of raid as F-18s, and I kind of just about managed to see that it got 2 contacts out of it. And around the same time, Madness with his supervision managed to see them out with the tally.
Okay, Rage 1.
1-3, nothing really much to add. Just that I called tally 2 ship. I managed to use kind of the helmet mounted sight, and it will kind of show you where the box is if it's not on the HUD. And I think another problem we encountered is because the flight was flying in kind of because we were in a right line abreast, and the azimuth and the direction of travel that the kind of group had to us, at about, I'd say, 10 miles out, I first lost the contact because my radar couldn't crank over left enough, and then about a few seconds later, Rage 1-2 lost radar contact as well.
Yeah, so that's what we were seeing from up here. We heard the call out from all 3 that you had contact on the... What we didn't hear, so I tried to pimp you, is no one was calling out the radar timeline in terms of distance. There was no 40, 35, 30, 25, 20. But more surprisingly is everybody called out that they had contact on the group. And okay, there was some problems there, breaking them out, doing the search. But then the group maneuvered off to the side, and well, I guess someone called out tally. Still, people weren't sure where the group was, which is baffling, and then the group flew off to the side, and people were surprised by that, which is particularly surprising for me. You had radar contact with these guys out at, like, I don't know, 55 miles or so. As Madness pointed out, you're looking at the box through the HUD, and you can see where they are. He's using his eyeballs, but the radar mechanics kind of fell apart. I don't know what happened there, but they flew off to the side and people weren't realizing it, I guess. And in its benign, constant speed, constant heading, low altitude way, it was possible for that.
Ryan, you've cut out for us.
Anyway, any comments about the lack of commentary on the distance as the timeline rolled along, and how, even though it seemed like everyone had radar contact, people people weren't sure of where the group was?
You dropped out for me for a little while there, but I think we had eyes on the group and everyone had mutual radar contact.
I assume toward the end there, were you grabbing the TCS?
I think through lack of experience, we're kind of just sort of thinking,
Yeah, I was playing around with that.
And I don't think anything ever materialised with that. So maybe if we break this down into
okay. I just wanted to make sure.
and rehearse each chunk-wise, and then string it together, maybe that might work better.
All right. Any response to the lack of counting out the timeline 40, 35, 30, 25?
I for one did pick up that's something we had to do, but I probably just missed that earlier in the lesson.
Okay. Any other comments from this last evolution before we try another?
Yeah, so you do want the varying distances being called out, because I was under the impression it was mostly the tactical range that you are interested in calling out.
Something should be called out, and I wasn't hearing anything. Like I said, I tried to pimp you all with one or two distance calls, but then no one picked it.
Rage flight, go echelon right. Whenever we're in cap, just stay echelon right.
Rage 1-2.
Anyway, the goal is to provide those call-outs, especially early on, to ensure everyone's situational awareness meter is at 95% or to prevent essentially what happened where the group just flew past you and only one or two guys out of the flight.
Are you needing to hop off here?
Ah, fuck. Yeah, I gotta
But
go.
at least if you guys were aware of it, you guys weren't maneuvering on it or reacting at all.
Yeah, so from the Rage 1 Rio's point of view, I'm basically taking the opportunity to play around a little bit more, because I'm a little bit jealous that they can actually break out the contact groups, so I'm not paying as much attention to that side of things and just seeing if I can break things out.
Okay, we'll spawn another group.
This will be the last one. I'm already fucking late.
No, we can end it here. I'm fine with that.
He's just spawning another. I mean, we might as well. This is just...
The other two can.
We'll end on a high note.
All right.
All right, guys. This is gonna be the last go for me. I've got to run after this one.
All right.
Dark Star, single group, bold 06780, 19,000, track west, over.
Rage 1 commit.
Rage flight, go line abreast right.
Rage 1-2. Rage 1. Dark Star, single group.
Yeah, so
069, bullseye 069 at 7.
go ahead and make 020 here.
15,000. Track southwest.
Check right, 020.
Rage 1-2.
Rage 1-3, radar contact.
Rage 1 contact, bull 067, 73, 19,000.
Dark Star, Rage 1, single group is confirmed.
Rage 1, meld, 025, 47, 19,000.
Rage 1. Rage 1-3.
Darkstar, Rage 1, contact Bra 04056, 37,000.
40 miles.
Rage 1, filtering traffic.
First group 40 miles.
Yeah, probably don't worry about that one. I'm sure he's not dicking with us here.
Yeah, he's wanting us to sanitize.
Ah.
Darkstar, signal group is Bullseye 069 at 68, 19,000, track southwest, bogey.
35 miles.
Wrong frequency. Oh well.
Single work 30 miles.
Darkstar, single group is Bra 022, 30 miles, 19,000, hot, bogey.
Oh, should I do it? Should I Judy him?
I don't know. But we probably need to call like a target here, right?
Rage 1 sort.
Yo.
Rage 1, 2 single.
Range 20. Never mind.
Rage 1-3, tally first
Thank
group
you.
single target. Looks like a single con confirm.
Dash 1 checking with TCS.
Rage 1-1 also has single.
Turn on.
10 miles. Rage flight, defend 360.
Rage 1, 2 high. 4 o'clock, 1 mile.
Rage 1, tally single group.
Rage 1 in left eyeballs.
Rage 1-3, high cover mid.
I'm just hoping he comes back
Rage 1,
with something that I can
high,
Judy him.
4 o'clock, 1 mile. Rage 1, 2 going high cover left.
Darkstar, single group, possible.
Rage 1, breaking left, clearing. 1, 2, take a shot. Shoot.
Rage 1, 2 second.
Shoot.
1-3's got gun solution. 1-3 going gun. Rage 1-3 splash bandit.
Good kill, 1-3.
Alright, AIC knock it off, Rage 1 flight knock it.
Let's start knocking off.
Rage 1 knock it off.
Alright, Rage flight, you can reset. Okay, let's do a debrief, Rage 1.
Alright, so I think that one went definitely a little bit better with kind of the communication there. I think we got I think I did maybe get the meld off a little bit too soon because there was that extra contact in there that we probably should have talked about first before doing the meld. But we did at least get that called out.
Great flight. Rejoin echelon right.
I saw that it was only a single contact. And I'll hand it over to the pilot from there.
Yeah, so for me, this is cool because I'm kind of freeing up my mental workload a little bit because I know the onus is more on the radar mechanics of this, so I'm getting to focus on kind of working with a flight and coordinating the turns and direction kind of with the Rio on intercom. Once we get that sorted, relaying it out and getting to kind of work the comms we learned. So yeah, I mean, this was definitely a little smoother. There was definitely better SA overall, and yeah, we got in. There was a little bit of confusion that I think actually that the Europe guys are going to get the class on this tomorrow, but yeah. But I mean, we got it figured out once we merged. We went in left. One was eyeballs, got the call as hostile, cleared left, and -3 got the kill with guns. Guess I'll kick it over to -2. You could hear me, right?
Sure could.
Okay.
Nothing heard. Am I supposed to be talking?
Yeah, I don't hear Ryan, so I don't know if he is, but yeah, I just kind of kicked it to you for your debrief.
Roger, yeah, I think I'm getting intermittent comms. From my perspective, yeah, I think we took a while to detect, probably with our slightly different radars. Once we got the detection, Three and myself worked through our usual sort of, see if we can raid it, see if we can separate out the flight. I couldn't separate it out into more than a single term. What confused me is when the sort call came out, I was thinking, well, if we only think it's a one ship, what difference does that make? And that's probably just my lack of education more than anything.
No difference if it's a one ship. I mean, your sort doesn't, the sort returns a single contact and everyone's then focused on it, and then the decision is, okay, who's going to shoot.
Right, so from Rage 1 Rio, basically my thought process there was I couldn't break anything out, so I figured I would just say sort, and if you guys could break something out, then good.
Roger, so just from my understanding, the pre-commit, I'm range roll scan, as much scan volume as I can manage. Then we commit, continue to give it as much scan volume as possible, sanitize as much as possible. Maybe, probably playing with the PRF settings to get the best chance of detection. And then once we go into the meld, I'm switching over to a track wheel scan, fairly narrowed scan volume. And because it's an F-18, doing my raid to try and see if I can separate out any tracks. Am I then to assume that STT is a sort function, or is that just a pre-contract? When we meld, these person will STT automatically, these people will TWS? That kind of...
Single target track is only when you're sure that everyone has the target that they're supposed to have, and now you can neglect situational awareness on everything other than your assigned contact.
Right, so with the sort, I'm guessing there should be a sort directive where... so the sort directive from Anktel, essentially him saying go single target track.
Correct. So in the P825 document in Appendix C, it gives an example of comm flow for this and some other things. So, you are target single. Okay, then it's, in your case, maybe Rage 1-2, target high contact in single group. Rage 1-3 target low contact. Then, the timeline goes, people should be spitting out the timeline, certainly at least the 30 nautical miles. 30 nautical miles is when you start the meld. So, Rage, meld, bra, whatever it was, in your case it was probably bra 020, 30 miles, what was it, 19,000. Then, once you've kind of got the meld there and everyone's kind of got situational awareness, contact on that group and what, then it's going to be sort as, and someone's going to say, well, in our example, we really should only have 2 aircraft, but maybe it's Rage 1-2 sorted either east man or right, and or you could call something else. If it was an echelon or something, and it's unclear whether you should sort azimuth or range, someone can call it out: sort azimuth or sort range. Once you've got confirmation from everyone in the flight that they are sorted on the appropriate thing, and we don't have 2 people both sorting on right man, you enter single target track independently without any kind of direct. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Aren't you glad we went out on a high note?
So anyway, so there's several examples there.
So I'm just looking at that appendix, so thanks to you for pointing that.
Just stepping.
Sig.
Ryan and Ankelin were stepping over each other on 249.8.
Yeah. Alright. So looking at that, I think part of the question that was being asked was, what do we do in that kind of single, like we only see one thing, so it looks like what we're after is, I would say, single only at this particular altitude. You have a look and then you confirm that you see the same.
Correct. So that's a bold call to, because what you're doing for the entire flight situational awareness is, yeah, we agree there's only one guy. If a second airplane pops up, immediately your situational awareness meter is maximum 60%. Because where the hell did the second guy come? So it's a bold call to make.
Alright, but at this point, what I'm saying is, if it's with these NPC groups at least, I'm not going to be breaking them out on this end.
Yeah, so the F-14's radar modeling is certainly better than it seems like every other module's radar modeling. So that's my frustration with this game, with the infinite resolution radar. Hopefully they improve the radar modeling of everyone else, which makes it more realistic, which shows how difficult this is to fight against aircraft traveling in that res and cell formation.
Just from out of curiosity, for something like that, like you said, it's a bold call to make. Would we be able to, like as a directive, say, okay, 1 and 2 will go STT, -3 should stay track while scan just in case, or in the case of a 2 ship, 1's STT, 2 is just remains TWS.
Yeah, so I mean it's 2 on 1 in principle at that point. So you decide who's going to be the guy who's making the missile shot, and the other guy should stay in a track while scan around that contact.
Okay.
If for whatever reason the guy's missile gets trashed or his radar breaks after he fires the missile, the wingman who's in track while scan can immediately lock up that target, because in principle he still sees only one contact, and fire. Also, you can employ missiles from a track while scan anyway.
It's also probably worth mentioning that, from our point of view at least here, that if we're flying against humans, we'll probably be able to break them out a lot easier.
Of your radar and what missiles you have is, if you can employ on a track while scan track, you could, I suppose, both stay in track while scan mode. Just be advised that the adversary can do things that are much harder to defeat when you have them in single target track. Anyway, that's kind of up to the individual fighter situation, individual fighter aircraft. It's hard to write all of that into a book, and you'll notice P-825 really doesn't have much of a commentary on it.
Yeah, and I mean we're kind of figuring out in real time like how to work well with like a Hornet, for example, like where their strengths are, being able to use that ray to break those targets out, and we're able to at least get contact at a much greater distance, so we can help them kind of direct where that cursor needs to go in their own scope. So it's interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of independent study that has to be done in air-to-air threat 3, much more so than air-to-air threat 2, much more so than air-to-air threat 1. Because just like the real world, you at this point in the real world, you've been focused on your career jet for probably 2 or 3 years. So you might be really knowledgeable about the F-18, and you might not hardly know anything about the F-16, which now you need to be able to fight side by side out in the real world. So, yeah, I mean, it's all the stuff that you learn. You just kind of learn, okay, we're partnering with F-16s, and so this is what we've learned and what we need to do, and our strengths and weaknesses, and their strengths and weaknesses. In air-to-air threat 2, you were mostly learning the strengths and weaknesses against adversary aircraft in dissimilar BFM. Now you're beginning to learn the strengths and weaknesses of friendly aircraft operating together in beyond visual range. So anyway, that's more of the challenge and why air-to-air threat 2
God, I
takes
thought
at
that said
least
10
2.5
miles, not
months.
100. Cool.
Any other questions or comments from that evolution?
No, for me, I thought that went, a lot better. And again, like we're just kind of learning how to even work together. So this is all really, really good stuff. Unfortunately, I really have to go. Thank you guys for joining us, and Ryan, thanks for the class too. Really appreciate it. This is really cool.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, I'll see you, I guess, on Tuesday. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the time we've set aside for this, but you guys, of course, are welcome to continue on if you want.